Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Jim Nowakowski on behalf of Interline Creative Group, talking about one of my personal favorite topics, strategy in a world of constant disruption. We know you're out there. We could see you in this wonderful platform. Go to webinars. So if you have a question, put it in the question box. If you want to chat up, Bernie is also with me. She's our #1 at Interline and help navigate all your registrations. And we got a fine audience comprised of designers and architects, retail people, and some accounting people. This is great because strategy is important to everybody. So here we go. Ready? This is AIA approved. So if you take this course, you stick with me, you'll get your AIA credit. If you have trouble getting your certificates, just send us an email. We'll take care of it. It's IDCEC approved, which is the interior designers. We have several interior designers in the audience. Thank you for coming. Very grateful for your attention. And it's also NKBA approved, pardon me. And those are for the kitchen and bath designers, the sales representatives in the audience as well, all three organizations. It's also copyright, but it's going to be recorded and we'll post it on our website afterwards. If you want to take screenshots, please be my guest. But if you send me an email when we're done, I would be more than honored to send you PDF files. You'll have questions, and actually we'll talk about that in a moment. So the course was developed before COVID, revamped during COVID, and then revamped after COVID because the situation is fluid that we live in. So what we're going to do is revisit the timeless business fundamentals of strategy and how strategy is more important than what you're selling. I don't care what you're selling, whether you're doing accounting services or you're a showroom consultant or you're a designer. Without strategy, you're flying without radar. So by the end of the course, participants will be able to define the core principles of planning, strategy, right? We're going to talk about that a lot. You're going to get sick of the word strategy, but you can't get sick. Jim Mattis said you got to think until your head hurts when you're thinking about strategy. And boy, does my head hurt today. Identify common sources of disruption in modern professional practices like architecture, design, accounting, etc. We're gonna differentiate between key strategic approaches. There's only 4. Don't get worried. Defensive, offensive, flanking, and guerrilla. We're going to talk about all that. And we're going to apply foundational business questions to access the internal positioning, that's a mouthful, of customer engagement. And then we're going to reflect on your past business challenges. I want to start this off with what it's all about: service. It doesn't matter what you are in the audience. It doesn't really matter. You're in the service business, whether you're a manufacturer, a consultant in a showroom, an accountant, an architect, a designer, whatever. You're in the service business, just like we are. We're in the service business. So being in the service business, you want to be cross-selling all the time, listening for those opportunities. Always be closing, listening, it's becoming a lost art. Why? Because we're on our cell phones so much. Did you hear they're banning cell phones in schools finally? Let's hear it for the schools, right? These kids are they're just social media addicts. It's not good. It's not good for business. It's not good for anything. So even if you hear an opportunity for another business, share it with them. One of the things I asked when you registered was for one of the most important questions you have about strategy. So I picked out a few of these and I just want to mention them. There are many more. I can't answer all of them, but I will answer them in a personal email. One of you wrote economic volatility, where people are putting projects on hold because of the uncertainty right now. So what would be a good strategy for that? Strategy can answer that question. If you have a strategy for when people put things on hold, one of your strategies might be, well, you don't have to pay me all at once. But we're going to talk about that. Finding contacts and creating connections via email because I'm so far away to connect personally. Perfect. That's an email strategy, which we will be discussing. You know, you get emails, I get 200 over a day. I do not read 2 of them. I really depend on, first of all, my spam filters to filter out what I don't want to read, but also I depend on the return address. And you can tell when people are doing that. But if you want to penetrate, if you want, your strategy is you want to penetrate to penetrate the veil, right? The office gatekeeper, you're going to have to, the email strategy you create is going to have to take into context what the hell you're talking about. Hi, I'd like to work for you. That's not a good email strategy. You got to tell people what they want to hear, and what they want to hear are solutions to their problems. Well, Jim, how do I know what their problem is unless I talk to them? Well, guess. Are you kidding me? You can probably figure that out by just looking at the internet and by thinking about your own clients, getting ahead of budgeting or for unexpected additional costs to complete the project. Well, the strategy for that is to build in a contingency fee right up front, right up front. I have a blog on this about pricing, but we'll talk about this and how to develop and apply strategic planning to navigate disruptions. Ladies and gentlemen, whoever asked that question, and I'm not going to reveal that person to everybody in the audience, is my friend for life, because that's what this discussion is about, disruptions. Which happen every day. It's happening now. I had a disruption today where I almost told Bernie, offer everybody a Starbucks card and a personal presentation because I can't make this presentation. But here I am, because the disruption didn't last as long as I thought it would. And then relevance. What's your strategy for maintaining relevance and for scheduling delays that you don't have? And that's an interesting concept because we just did a pricing strategy for one of our clients because of the tariffs, and everybody's facing problems with tariffs, but we're going to talk about all that. I like to start out with a quote from Jim Mattis. Call Sign Chaos was his book. He was the former Department of Defense secretary. Think about this. Digital technologies can falsely encourage remote staffs to believe that they possess a God's eye view of combat. Digital technologies do not, I repeat, do not dissipate confusion. The fog of war can actually thicken when misinformation is instantly applied. And you know what I'm talking about, ladies and gentlemen. I'm talking about that email you get when you're in the middle of a project that suddenly you read and say, how the heck did this happen? How did this happen? And then you realize after investigation that it didn't really happen. Someone had misread your email that you just sent before. Ladies and gentlemen, people don't really read anymore. That's one of the problems. And what is reading? Listening. I told you up front, listening is a lost art. Learn to take your time. Don't just scan emails. I'm guilty too. I've skimmed over emails and then the client calls, well, I sent you that email, and I look and sure enough, there it was at the bottom of the email, and I never made it to the bottom of the email. So we're all guilty. So one of the conclusions, one of the strategies I follow is to take my time. Jim Mattis is a contemporary of ours. I'm going to go back into the past with David Ogilvy, who was a genius way before the internet, way before anything was invented. Advertisers who ignore research are as dangerous as generals who ignore the signs of the enemy. Don't ignore research. Well, Jim, I don't have time to do. No, you don't have time maybe to do original research, but you certainly have time to do research for your own customers. That's what I'm talking about. Do your homework, read all the time. Don't let anything fall through the cracks if you can help it. Because if you don't know who you're selling to, then you're just faking it, right? When I was a student teacher, I had to observe. You got to observe before you student teach. And the teacher I was observing was standing up against the blackboard, holding himself up on the blackboard, talking to the class like this. Every day in South America, the tribes of the South America, blah, blah, blah. You know, they were falling asleep. Falling asleep. That's not what you want to do. You'll never be able to sell effectively if you don't know who you're talking to, if you don't know how that person thinks, and what that person needs. That's the secret of success. So strategy is how you take control of those answers. How many customers do you have? Now in the audience, if I ask you to write that down or put that in the chat or in the question box, there's one individual or two that are going to say, not enough. Well, that's a trick answer, because if you say, I don't, how many customers do you have? Not enough. If you have too many customers, you're in deep doo-doo. If you have too few customers, you're in deep doo-doo. So the answer is a balance. Everything in life is balance. How many do you want? Oh, as many as I can get. That's the wrong answer. You wouldn't, depending on your firm, if you're a 50-person firm, that might, I want 1,000 customers. I don't think so. If you're a 1-person firm, I want as many as I can get. I don't think so. So how do you handle this? What are your short-term goals? What are your long-term goals? Strategy is going to help you drive up these answers. Knowing your target audience wants, what they need, and how they think will help you design an effective strategy. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, the path to purchase. This is what your customers follow when they're trying to find you. You know there are people looking for your services right now on the internet. And what are they looking for? What you're selling. And how do they find you? Through Google. So you better have good SEO, because they have a problem. You are being evaluated by people right now that you don't even know you're being evaluated by, because you're not using IP reverse lookup technology. That's another story. So you look for solutions, you compare your options, you decide and you buy, and then you evaluate how I feel about the options. That's what your customers go through. Just look at yourself. When you're trying to buy something, what do you go through? What do you go through? Kenichi Omei was a director at McKinsey. He's a very smart guy. He wrote a book called The Mind of the Strategist. And he said this: in business is on the battlefield. There's a lot of battlefield comparisons here, ladies and gentlemen. The object of strategy is to bring about conditions most favorable to one's own side, judging precisely the right move to attack or withdraw, and always assessing the limits of compromise. I have a client now who just hired someone who's a social media aficionado, right? But the problem is that his customers, the client's customers, are not always on social media. This is an older, audience. They've been around for a long time. They're basically engineers, and they're not always on X or on Instagram, blah, blah, blah. So we were talking about social media, and he's coming from the consumer side, and that's an instantaneous world, the B2C world. The news, it's what you do when you turn on the news today. It's happening now. I can't wait. That's not the business you're in. The business you're in is called B2B. It requires thought. It requires careful analysis of when you pull triggers. When do you pull your triggers? In other words, if you have a press release about your services, do you do it immediately, or do you do it when you open your showroom or when an event occurs? So you have to form the habit of analysis, these two arrows right here. You have to be intellectually elastic, flexible. There is no proven formula. Ladies and gentlemen, do you think for a moment that if there was a proven formula, I would be talking to you now? You wouldn't need me. You wouldn't need each other. You just have a proven formula. No such thing. No such thing. And your goal, if you haven't figured it out, is to win. Nobody remembers second, third, fourth place, right? Unfortunately, you're in a business, no matter what business you're in. I told you who's in that audience today. You want to win. And how do you do that? Through strategy. It's not just a plan. It's a habit. Every day, it's a habit. That's what habits are. I drink 4 cups of espresso every morning. That's a habit. My dentist says, why do you do that? I have to clean my teeth a lot. I said, because I can't stop it. I like espresso. That's my habit. Well, strategy is my habit too. Every day, I wake up thinking about strategic opportunities with my clients. This is a strategic opportunity. These webinars I've been doing for the last 10 years, because they get us out there and they let us test our theories. They let us share what we know with you. Strategic judgment means knowing when to act and when not to act. Yes, ladies and gentlemen. It's not just a hip shot every time you react. I got to react. I remember telling clients when social media was first invented. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, I'm an older guy. Don't react to people who are trying to bait you. That's still, I still have a rule for my writers. What's the rule of social media? Don't do anything stupid. Right? And what's stupid? Well, it's doing posts when you're half in the bag, you after a night out. Like that one guy reporter who just got fired, right? It's not about avoiding problems, it's about preparing for them, doing what if scenarios. It's about intellectual flexibility, like I mentioned. And if you're going to do strategy, ladies and gentlemen, you have to have an open mind. You can't think like you've been thinking. If you want to do strategy, real strategy, you got to be open up to new ideas. You understand? I think a cautious person, think about this, read the quote up there. A cautious person, when it's time to act suddenly, he doesn't know how, and he's consequently ruined. That's not me saying that. That's a great thinker. I think it was actually Machiavelli. Yes, you should read the classics. You can read books on strategy. I'm not saying don't read books. You should read books, but no, these are some thick books. Or just erase your blackboard. What does that mean, Jim? Erase your blackboard. Forget about what you think you know and start looking at what happens now. I was dragged kicking and screaming into the world of social media because I come from print. Like I told you, I'm an old guy, right? And I remember my IT guy at the time saying, no, Jim, this is the next thing to do. I became a Twitter addict. I was a Twitter junkie. I experimented with social media platforms like Instagram. I was there when TikTok was invented. And after experimenting with it, I rejected it. Now you may use it, and that's great. I applaud you. And if you get business from it, I applaud you. But don't think that that's on everybody's blackboard. If you use one social media platform, you're missing strategic opportunities. These are the rules of branding. Do you know how many interior designers there are in the United States? Over 70,000. Do you know how many kitchen and bath designers there are? Do you know how many designers that think they're designers, but they're not members of ASID or IIDA or the AIA, but they think they know because they go on Google. Google, you should embrace and, love Google, but hate it too. Google's very rich by taking advantage of people who don't understand how information flows. And I have a great respect for Google and what they built. Should have bought stock when I was there when Google was invented. The first brand and remember this, you're a brand. Your firm is a brand. You are a brand. You're a personal brand, and the firm you're working for is a brand. And the first brand in the brain gets twice the long-term market share than the second, and the second twice again as much as the third, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And what does that mean? Well, if you're not there, they have a saying, if you're not on the menu, what? You're not eating or whatever the hell it is. There's enormous advantages in being first. Well, Jim, I can't be first in everything. There's nothing new under the sun. Of course there is. And I'm going to prove it to you. I'm going to prove it to you in this seminar. These are the 4 strategies I mentioned. Defensive strategy, offensive strategy, guerrilla attack, right? Guerrilla, and then flanking maneuvers. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail with this, but these are strategies you need when you're launching and competing in the world. So you have a competitor, you want to match a designer just launched, let's say, a concierge service. They'll come to your home instead of coming to the showroom. All right, they launched that. Well, if you match a competitor's launch, well, I'm gonna do a concierge service too, and that's okay. That's a defensive strategy. A guerrilla strategy may be a different type of concierge service. A flanking strategy may be what? Put you in a new category. A kitchen concierge service. You see what I'm saying? So that's what I'm talking about. Now, what's an offensive strategy? The main consideration in launching an offensive strategy is basically how strong is the leader. Ladies and gentlemen, the people in my audience, I've looked at your website. If you gave me one, if you gave me an AOL site, I can't look at that, or if a Gmail, I can't look at that. But if you have a website, I looked at it, and you are fine companies. But I did not recognize you as market leaders. Now, you may think you are, as many of my clients. Most of my clients, when I work for them, think that they're the market leaders. And even though many of them have great market share, I had one client who thought they were the leader in this one little niche category, right? And suddenly, overnight, basically overnight, 5 new competitors came onto the market competing with my client's product. Why? Because the person they were buying, the company they were buying the product from, started selling it to other people. They had no exclusive agreement with my client. So suddenly now my client finds himself competing against everybody with the same product. That's absolute craziness, right? There's no chance. How do you differentiate then? Well, you choose one of these strategies. So only a leader should consider playing defense. What does that mean? Well, you don't have to, if somebody launches a new service like we were talking about and you're not the leader, don't worry about it. You probably don't need it unless you do research in your market and say, oh, this is good. You should never attack unless you got superior force. You don't have to. A lot of times when I was in the early days serving in the agency business in B2B, most of my clients would want to do a direct attack. When a competitor came out with a product and they came out with a product, they wanted to do a direct attack. Hire us and fire them. That was usually the thing. Well, we're going to attack them. Some clients that I had thought that they owned the market, so they never did it, except when their patents ran out. When their patents ran out, they decided that, and then the competitor came out with an exact duplicate of their product. They had to figure out quickly how to differentiate. So they started splitting apart the different offerings on their product while they meanwhile retooled and came out with a new product. Those are strategies that people take. They're not all correct. They're not all the ones you should take, but they're the ones you should think about when you're thinking about strategy. Guerrilla warfare is very interesting. Home Depot became Home Depot by doing guerrilla strategy. Do you know that? They would pick out a geography, like let's say Kansas City. They would go into Kansas City. They would look at all the home building, sources there. They would do research and go out and find out what their pricing is. And they would come in with their store at absolutely the lowest price. They would advertise like that. That's the way they became Home Depot. And they destroyed every other competitor eventually. I can send you a book on this. This was great strategy on Home Depot's part. And look at them today. Look at them today. Contractors go to Home Depot, right? In the morning, you can see them every morning at Home Depot picking up their stuff because once they became Home Depot, the giant, they decided to expand by serving the contractor market and competing against distributors, big distributors like Ferguson, biggest plumbing distributor in the country, maybe in the world. And then flanking strategies. So these are all strategies to be aware of. Well, Jim, when do you use which, when, where? Well, depends on the problem you're facing. And we can talk about that offline. Just send me an email. So it requires discipline. You can't panic. You never panic. In your business, you face problems each and every day. The shipment didn't ship. They changed the specifications. A new rule came out. Look at what tariffs are doing to businesses today. It's unbelievable how much, consulting we have done with our clients on how to handle these tariffs with strategy, pricing strategy. Because ladies and gentlemen, part of strategic planning is part of your strategy. If you know something's coming, you should prepare for it. We're going to talk about disruption in a minute. So what does that mean? Well, what do you do when you lose a client? Look at this one. Have you done strategies? What do you do when you lose a client? What do? Do you have a strategy mapped out? I'll tell you what our strategy is. When we lose a client, we call them up, we interview them. We've got 7 questions we ask, And we say, well, okay, if the new person you hired, the new firm you hired doesn't work out, we're here for you. It's okay. And because you can't hold on for clients forever, the longest client Interline held on to was 20 years. That's a long run in my business, a very long run. But it's, you know, it's not the end of the world when you lose a client. If you've never lost a client, applaud you. I applaud you. But you will lose a client. So strategy means figuring out what you do instead of, you know, taking out the corporate gun and blowing your head off. Win a client, right? You want to, what do you do when you win a client? Well, we just serve the hell out of them. Well, that's great. But how did you win it? What can you learn from the win that you can apply to other wins? That's strategy. Budget gets cut. How many times, I can't tell you how many times our budget has been cut. We had a client, this was $1 million account a year, $1 million worth to us, right? October, they call us up and they say, we have no more money for the rest of the year. October, November, December, 2 more months without income. I said, don't worry about it, we'll carry you. What do you mean you carry you? We'll just charge you for outside expenses that we use for buying advertising. But we'll suck up our fees. You will? Absolutely. That was thought out way before the budget cut. That was part of our strategy in dealing with clients. Do you know how grateful that client was for the next several years? Do you have any idea? That at least kept us in business with them for 5 years because clients don't forget that. What do you do when your key employee resigns? We just had a client the other day, 18 years, they're gone, just overnight, vanished, gone. Gone. What do you do? Our client's still trying to recover. In other words, when problems arise, you need a strategy to guide your response. You can't be reactive. You can't just, oh, geez. Panic is the most important enemy of success when you panic. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to tell you, not knowing what to do is a horrible feeling. Strategy helps you overcome that feeling. When you have a strategy and a disruptive event happens, you not only know what to do, you do it. You do it. Because with strategy, you always have a response ready-made. Well, Jim, I can't anticipate everything, can I? Can I anticipate everything? Yes, you can. Yes, you can. Are my slides moving? Bernie, are my slides moving?
It just, for some reason, it went back to the beginning.
Wow.
It just happened though.
Wow. Can you
There
see
you
it
go.
now?
We're back.
We good?
Yep.
What would I do without Bernie? What would I do without Bernie? Bernie, what would I do without you? Thank you. In the crash of 09, this is a headline from Crane Chicago Business. I don't know how many of you in the audience were alive in 09 or in business in 09. I hope you were alive in 09. This was a headline. Business hunkers down. Executives, quote, scared to death. I keep that headline in front of me every day. I look at that headline every day because you know why? That is such a stupid response to the crash of 09. That's such a stupid response to tariffs. That's such a stupid response, period, if you're in business. How can you be scared to death? Well, Jim, fear, you don't know what's coming. We want certainty. Have you heard that lately? We want certainty. The market needs certainty. Is there such a thing as certainty? I'm just asking. Is there such a thing as certainty? I know of 2 things that are certain, and you know what they are. You want me to tell you? Death and taxes. And even then, some people don't pay their taxes. But you can't outrun Father Time. Can't do it. And fear is one of our strongest emotions. The only way you can overcome fear is through training, practice, practice. How do you think Navy SEALs become Navy SEALs? How do you think great businessmen become great businessmen and women? Practice, 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 strategy. This is from the Marine handbook that talks about what happens when you go to war. I show this, and I'm not gonna dwell on this. Violent, unnerving sights and sounds when you're in battle. If you've ever been fired or you're gonna be in a RIF, like a reduction in force, if you've ever been part of that, this is exactly what happens. If you've ever lost the clients, violent and unnerving sights and sounds. The phones are ringing or they're not ringing. Casualties, people get fired. I worked for a boss once. He went to lunch, he came back, his office was packed up, ready to go. He didn't know what the hell hit him. Confusion, lack of information, feelings of isolation, all of this happens in business disruptions. What are your strategies to take charge when these things happen? What are your strategies when you lose a client? When you get sick, who's going to take over for you when you get ill? Or do you just work through that illness as much as you can? Maybe at half mast, right? You can't operate at 100%. Knowledge is comparison. This is a blog I wrote many years ago. What's the worst thing that can happen to your business? I was doing a panel discussion for young high school students, entrepreneurs. And this one tall guy kept raising his hand. He wanted to be caught because one would say, well, I lose a client, or I get fired, or blah, 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 blah. And this tall kid kept raising his hand. And I said, okay, what's the worst thing that can happen to your business? And he goes, assassination. Sorry. Assassination. I said, what are you talking about? He says, assassination. I'm from the Philippines. I said, oh, okay. Now, if you know anything about the Philippines, you can get assassinated pretty easily, I guess. I don't know. The worst thing that can happen to your business is you lose it. And once you realize that, all your strategies, all your thinking, everything else is to keep it going, right? That's the worst thing that can happen. What are you going to do, right? So the road less traveled by, the unexpected, you have to be able to expect the unexpected all the time. That's what I mean by always listening, being aware of trends, of what people are saying. You don't have to believe everything people are saying, but you should be aware of what people are saying. So your strategy will always be basically to make decisions that prevent the worst thing from happening. Why? I want to win. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm proud to say, I'm happy to announce, this is my only personal advertisement. We've been in business over 35 years. You cannot be in my business over 35 years, scalable, but not we're not a big business, but you can't last the size of we are. We were up to 25 people at our peak several years ago. And I'm not going to get into it, but you cannot last that long in my business unless you have a strategy that has one thing in mind: win. And how do we win in my business? We offer services no one can get anywhere else. You have to offer things no one else can get anywhere else, because things will happen. And as they happen, you got to be able to deal with them. And if you don't have a strategy, and when they happen, for example, one of the biggest things that happened was that 09 downturn, right? What do? We're in the business. Nobody's buying advertising from a marketing company. They pulled everything in. They retract. They stopped doing what they should do, which is advertise, and they retract. They get afraid. So what did we do? Well, we differentiated. We started our CEU courses, which we're still doing today, sharing our knowledge, right? We got into the spiff business. Spiffs. We are the largest spiff company in the plumbing business. We have major clients doing these spiff businesses. And we didn't do that when we first started. We were a direct mail marketing agency. You have to be flexible and open to ideas. That was not on my blackboard, Jim do spiffs. That came about from opportunities. So what do you think most companies do when disruption hits? They retreat. They do the exact wrong thing. You don't retreat. You have to have a strategy. Well, Jim, if nobody's buying anything, what the heck can I do? Do anything to stay active, keep your people employed, and move forward, because it's not going to last forever. Wait a minute, Jim, how do you know that? Well, did it? Does anything last forever? I don't know of anything that lasts forever except those two things I told you about, right? There's a world of difference in just reacting or reacting based on strategy. Personnel story. I was in a Vistage meeting, very famous organization. One of the people raised their hand and said, I want to do an employee manual, and I want to compensate my, my executives better than I do the working people. And I'd like your ideas. So people started talking around the table. And not only did I know that that question was really stupid, when it came to me, I said, well, you can't really do that. What do you mean you can't do that? I want to do that. I know you want to do that, but you can't do that. Why can't you do that? Because that's the wrong strategy. You cannot differentiate between employees if you're going to have a compensation plan, a simple plan, an IRA plan. You can't do it. You got to treat everybody the same. Well, how do you know that? Well, because I did research on it. And not only that, well, I need a personnel manual to outline that. I said, I don't have a personnel. How many people do you have? 20 people. And my lawyer told me, Jim, I don't need a personnel manual. Why? Because the people he came to interview all my people, my HR lawyer. He interviewed all my people. And when he was done, he pulled me in my office and he says, Jim, I really thought I'd make some money on doing a personnel manual for you, but you don't need one. Now, why don't I need one? Because everyone here understands the culture at Interline. That's the point. When you get in, you get a stack like 2 inches thick of memos that I've written over the years to read and understand. And that's why people who start there, if they only stay there after 2 years. If they stay after 2 years, I have them for a long time. If they don't, they're gone, and that's okay, because you can't handle our culture. I don't mind that. That's part of my strategy. Bernie, how long have you been with Interline?
28 years.
Thank you, Bernie. You can't keep someone of Bernie's caliber. You can't do it unless A, you treat them fairly, B, they love their job, 3, you give them success in order to win. And I'm not going to speak for Bernie, but that's why I love working with Bernie. You see? Okay. This is the most important chart you're ever going to see. This one right here. Take a screenshot. I'll send it to you if you want. This chart was from a supply chain feature article. Jim, this is not a supply chain discussion, is it? No, it's not. It doesn't matter. Disruption. See the line going there and then suddenly it dips? That's the disruptive event. Most of the time when a disruptive event, you get a client phone call, it's not, we're firing you. That's a disruptive event can be anything. Right? Schedule changes. I can't deliver the faucet in time. It could be whatever you think it is. But there's the disruptive event. And there's what happens is the decline. Performance, that's performance going across the bottom. Performance suffers. The only way you stop it from suffering and go a little bit better, right? In order to recover is with practice and with strategy. Strategy says, I will not let disruptive events disrupt me too much. They're going to disrupt you, but I'm not going to let them disrupt me too much. This is our strategy. The most valuable asset of business are my people, are its people at Interline. This is proven day in, day out. Every decision I make, we make, has this strategy. People are most important. When COVID hit and nobody was working, nobody was doing anything, we kept people employed. We took out a PPP, right? I hate loans. I hate them. I don't want to owe anybody any money. But I took it out and kept people employed. Bernie will testify to this. Not only did we keep them employed, we just had fun doing it. We actually went to work. We didn't stay at home and work from home. Some people did, right? We didn't do any of that. We just kept working. We declared ourselves a needed necessity. Why? Because we shipped soap. We were a distributor who shipped soap, and you need soap to be hygienic. So we are in business to make money. What are you in business for? Well, I'm in business to create great buildings. Great. I'm in business, whatever, to be the best accountant I could be. Great. You're in business, like I'm in business, to make money. And how do you make money? By giving people what they want and charging a fair price. That's it. That's it. And unless you know how to do that, and that's part of your strategy. What's part of our strategy? For example, how many competitors do you have? We have zillions. We do. We have people, well, you know what? We also compete against people in our clients have in-house marketing teams that we compete against. And yet our clients call us and they use us. Why? For the things that we've positioned in their minds as our differentiation, which is very important. Some strategy pros from Jim Nowakowski's personal playbook. There they are. Speed and development is the very first law. Every piece must be developed in one move. That's Aaron Nimzovich. He wrote a great book. He was a Russian chess master. That's the guy, the second from the left. SEALs do place a premium on brute strength, but an even greater premium on speed. Marcus Luttrell, far right. Right? You know what that is, the lone survivor? The first rule of flight control is if you don't know what to do, don't do anything. Gene Kranz, the guy on the far left, the guy who brought back Apollo 13, that's great advice. If you don't know what to do, don't do anything, right? Because why? If you do something and you don't know what to do and you're trying to bring back people from space, you kill them. And we're not bringing people from space. Our businesses are not that complex, right? Or are they? So the guy who I love for strategy is Alexander the Great, the little bust. I don't have a picture of him. They didn't have cameras. Anticipate, react, adapt. That's strategy in 3 words. Anticipate what's going to happen, react to what happens, and then adapt what you do, because you're going to have to adapt. Things change quickly. Create conditions in order to achieve the win, right? Whenever companies are competing for an essential resource, customers, sooner or later, when is companies get there's only so much business. So I hate to say it, ladies and gentlemen, but you're in competition. Everybody in the audience is a competitor of everyone else in the audience, and that's okay. Because quite frankly, if I've been in business this long, the only way we stand like this is through differentiation, especially now with my friend AI. If you haven't been fooling around with AI, don't take that the wrong way, you better get used to it, because ladies and gentlemen, that's the next disruption. And I've been trying to think this through for a long time, since it started, what, a year and a half ago? Artificial intelligence. It's unbelievable. That's all I can tell you. But you're gonna have to have a strategy in order to use it properly. Because you think Google represents a threat to you, because then everybody thinks they're a designer because they can go online and Google and ask Google. Google's using AI, right? ChatGPT, Claude. There's all sorts of platforms that are AI now. So what determines if you're going to be displaced or the displacer? What determines that? Strategy. You need an AI strategy. How are you going to use this? You can't ignore it. Look what happened to Kodak when they decided to ignore, right? Digital film. Not that film is digital, but digital photography. Look what happened to Kodak. Holy man, look what happened to many people. Look, if you ignore things that are going to displace you, you will be displaced. You will. Because look at the top right, no 2 companies can exist making their living in an identical way. You might think all businesses are like yours, but they're not. You can't be like other people, right? So you either are the displacer or you're displaced. So make judgments on what you do and when to do it. What you should be doing is a function of what the marketplace wants. And if the marketplace doesn't want your services, well, what's the worst thing that can happen to your business? You're not going to convince them that they want you. You can't do it. They got to want you, right? And service. We went to order a rug the other day, right? A little rug for the living room. The designer was beautiful, right? Perfect, showing us all sorts of designs. Pick the one we want. This is great. Couple weeks, calls up. By the time we got home, I want to be upfront with you. It's 2 months on back order. I said, whoa, 2 months. It's just a rug. Well, I said, well, hold off on it then. That's not good. That's a disruption on her. She spent time with us, at least a half hour. It was great, great information, knew her rugs. But 2 months? So what should, she didn't want to make, she couldn't make the deal. What should she have done? What is her strategy? Just rejection and go on to the next one, right? That's what that store did, probably. So just keep thinking. Your strategy should encompass what people want, not what you have. Well, Jim, what if I don't know what they want? Well, how did you stay in business all this time? Do a piece of research with your customers. Why do they hire you? Did you ever figure that out? Have you ever asked your customers? Your differentiation could be in pricing, functions, technology, styles, whatever. I don't know. I'd have to look at each one of you. But remember, the purpose of your strategy is to overcome hesitation when events occur. When disruption happens, when you're talking to a customer and they ask you a question you can't answer, what do you do? What do you do? Do you say, I don't know? Well, they taught me never to say that. Well, guess what? They were wrong. I say that all the time. I don't know. Let me get back to you. I'll find out. But having been in business 35 years, I pretty much, I got a lot of things in my head. Write it down and test it, test it, test it, and practice. Why are you doing what you're doing? Can you do what you're doing better? Can you do it differently? And give people what they want. And now it's time for questions. And we have some time. Actually, we have good questions coming in. I saw them coming in. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I really appreciate it. I think Bernie just handed me these questions. Wonderful. Here's one. Jim, you mentioned strategy helps avoid letting the world answer for you. I did say that. Can you give me a practical example of that happening in a real project setting, whether it was successful or not successful? Thank you for that question. That's a great question. Well, give me a second. Okay. The client, this is something that happened. A client was the third choice in a competitive market. This was ceiling tile. So we had a client that we got in contact with, and if you know ceiling tile, you designers, there's Armstrong, there's great companies that make ceiling tile, but this company that called us was the number third in the market. They called us and they said, we want your advice. So the number 1 and 2 competitors, they were buying inside and back, inside front and back covers. They were buying spreads on the inside and spreads on the back with the inside page there on architecture magazines. So there were 3 at the time, and they were buying spreads. They were just bombing the heck out of the market with great branding ads. So this was the third market company. I don't want to mention any names, but you can figure that out. And they said, we want to compete. So we hatched a strategy. We called it our bomber strategy. What we did is we made a deal with one of those architecture magazines, the one who had the AIA file. We called in the rep, and we said, we want to run 18 consecutive pages. How much for that? And we didn't even ask them how much. We said, we want to pay you X, which was way off the rate card. And we already know in buying advertising what that means. And the rep said, so tell me this, Jim, if we don't do this deal with you, are you going to go to the other magazine to do the deal? I said, yes, without hesitation. I said, yes, I know Jack, I'll go to Jack. He said, give me a minute. He calls the publisher, he talks to them, he comes back. This was a great guy. He started his own magazine a few years later. And he said, we'll do the deal, Jim, but you can't tell anybody. I said, who am I going to tell? So our strategy was to run 4 consecutive pages in this magazine twice and drop down to 1 page for the rest of the year. So 4 and 4, and then 1 for 10 months, 18 pages. And we told our client at that time, what that will do is that will send the 2 major, first of all, when they first see the first 4-page insert, it's going to send the 2 major competitors to get you to notice. They will notice you. Well, Jim, I don't want to be noticed by them. I want to be noticed by the architects. I said, okay, you will be, because you're running 4 consecutive, and it was a beautiful design ad, a campaign, if I say so myself. You will be noticed by your architects, but you will also be noticed by your competitors. See, ladies and gentlemen, that's strategy. Strategy is not taking into account just one thing you want to happen, but all the things that can happen. And I said to the client, the second time they run that, they're going to have serious marketing meetings. They're gonna know that you're coming after them, and then you're gonna drop back to 1 page for the rest of the year. And the benefit of this will be the guy who sold me the ads, because they'll just buy more ads with him. And that's exactly what happened. I'm not saying I have a crystal ball. I'm saying that strategy is thinking things through. And when it comes time to pull the trigger, you pull the trigger with confidence and you don't look back. Thank you for that question. We got a few more minutes. You stress the importance of listening as a strategic act. Jim, can you elaborate on what it means to listen for opportunities in a practice? That's a great question. I want to thank you very much, Judy, for that question. It's a tough question, but I want to give you an example. So I was in a client meeting and I was listening to the sales director bemoan his fate, right? He's sitting there. This is the director of a major multi-million-dollar plumbing company. He's bemoaning his fate. And what was he complaining about? Well, he can't get the checks out for Christmas time for the reps. He had a sales contest and he wants to write checks, to his sales representatives who are independent salespeople, but he can't get them out by Christmas time. Why? Well, because he works for a big company. It's a bureaucracy. He has a big accounting department. They had maybe 15 accounting people in there. And he can't get the checks out. Why? Because to write a check for what he wants them to do, you need social security numbers, blah, blah, blah. All the excuses that people make when they don't want to help somebody. And you do that too. I try not to do it. But if you don't want to help people, or sometimes you don't want that job that you're bidding on, you can raise your price. You don't have to, just raise your price. They won't take you. But in this case, I was listening to him and I said, well, I can write checks. And he looked at me. He says, what do you mean? I said, I can write checks. I know how to write a check. Well, how many checks do you need? He says, I need $125,000 worth. The guy had like 78 reps with multiple people in each office. And I said, I don't have $125,000. He says, well, I can give you the money. Can you write the checks? I said, I'd be happy to. I wrote the checks. Not only did I write the checks, that became the basis of our SPIF program. And Bernie knows what I'm talking about. You don't have to weigh in, Bernie. But right, being able to service a client that can't get something done is the key to your success. That's what's listening for opportunities. Same client several years later couldn't get metal plates manufactured for their product. That was like a little warning plate you put on the wall. We sourced it in China and got it done for them. Seriously, you listen. What, Jimmy? You got no business doing stuff in China. You're a marketing agency. No. We solve problems. That's what you do, ladies and gentlemen. You think you're in the accounting business, the design business? No. You're in the problem-solving business. Thank you for that question. That was exciting. By the way, this happens in every client meeting you have. Every client meeting you have. There's one great book that I didn't tell you about sales, and I forget the name of it now. But he was interviewing. What he did is he went around the world, because they don't teach sales in college. He went around the world and he started interviewing great salespeople. And one of them in New Jersey was a guy with a nickname, Cockroach. He was a remodeler. And this guy found out, he vetted him, and he was a great salesperson. So they're running along the beach one day, and he got enough nerve, the guy who wrote this, send me an email, I'll tell you who it was. He says, I got to ask you, why do they call you a cockroach? Why do they call you Cockroach? Nickname. He says, because once you let me in your house, you can't get me out. I don't want to say, I don't want to say anything, but can you think of a better nickname for somebody who wants to keep designing for a client? And I know there are some of you, maybe not in this audience today, who have very, very well-off clients who call on you regularly to design, but you would never, ever think of calling yourself a customer, right? But this guy was a remodel. He didn't care. He did painting. He did whatever. I don't want to say, one of our clients called us cocaine. And why do you call us cocaine? Because you're addictive. You're everywhere. That's the greatest compliment as a sales guy that I've ever received in my life. Of course, they have to have withdrawal system once they fired us, but that's okay. That's another story. Jim, how can strategic planning improve client relationships beyond just winning a project, especially in the longer sales cycles? That's a great question. Longer sales cycles like architecture. Well, it's a good question, but I don't understand it because long sales cycles are really the perfect opportunity to cultivate relationships. What? Yes, long sales cycles cultivate relationships, which means you're not in and out, give me some more, right? It's a long sales cycle. You can keep touch points. You can keep touching the client with ideas. How's it, I know we're waiting for this or we're doing that. You haven't made your decision on that, but did you see that? You're constantly cultivating relationship. By the way, strategic planning has nothing to do with relationships. If you're gonna have a goal of strategy, the end result of a successful strategy, one that doesn't have to be in the crosshairs, right, will occur naturally from strategy's execution. Your strategy of the long-term cycle that you're talking about is repeated, not being obnoxious, touch points. Repeated touch points with the client, right? Where you're touching him along the sales. We got one more. Jim, what's one strategic question you believe every professional should be asking themselves regularly, no matter what role or industry they're in? Great question, Tom, thanks. The most important question to kick off your strategy is, who is your customer? Who pays the bills? When we started working for a client one time, we said, who pays your bills? Well, the distributor does, but we never talk to them. We don't care about them. What do you mean you don't care about them? We care about the architect who specifies, the engineer who specifies. That's all well and good, but the distributor pays you your money. Who pays your bills? You can care about influencers, but who pays your bills? That's who's really your customer. That's the essential question to get what you want. Whoa, time's up. I want to thank you for being here. I can't imagine doing this without you. I'm so glad you're here. If you have any questions, Jim@interlinegroup.com, Jim@interlinegroup.com. You can call me, 847-358-48, anytime. My handle is @InterlineJim. Follow me on X if you'd like. Interline Group is our website. This is approved by those wonderful organizations. And thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate this. By the way, time, the non-essential resource, you gave me your time. I gave you my time. I humbly thank you. And if I can do anything for you, just Jim@interlinegroup.com. Thanks for coming.